Okay, welcome. Thanks for that suggestion. I needed to meditate together, so I'm grateful. I hope that was what you needed. I think I know almost everyone here, but my name is Supriya. I go by she, her, and welcome to Dharma class, whether it's your first time or your millionth, whether you know it or not. You're here, you're welcome, and please, we'll keep this conversational, especially tonight. Our topic is, let's see if this works, there we go. Our topic is the death of me. It's actually the last two classes, so this is going to be part one. We have another one on Thursday night. It's the last two classes of a 10-week series that we've been embarking on, a longer course called Death and the Realms of Existence. So we're looking at the world and the inhabitants of that world from a Buddhist perspective. But I'm not an expert in Buddhism. So really what I can give you is how, at least the way I received is how to take these teachings, which are verifiable. I'll show you the sources, or I'll be as clear as I can as to where these things are coming from. But what happens to them when they actually get implanted inside a human heart and become a part of the way you actually decide to live your life. So we've been spending the last few weeks talking about the details of the world, how it came to be, how it must inevitably be destroyed, and all the different beings that would inhabit those worlds. And it's kind of odd that this particular topic, it's at the end of the course. You'd think that we would open, as we've touched a lot upon death, right? And what does that actually mean? What would that experience entail? Why is it worth talking about it while we're alive? But it's actually how we close the class. So it's these two classes on death meditation, which is misleading. We're not actually going to meditate again today. So we'll talk about what that actually means. And let's do this before we jump in. So this was the vision you began creating at the end of the meditation. What we're doing in this mandala offering is connecting to that part of your mind that brought you to class, that made you click join on the Zoom link. It's important to connect with that part of your mind. I'm under no illusion that it's me. You know, I hardly can give you all any answers. So it's certainly not me that's bringing you back. It's something in you. And what you get to do in this offering, we'll hold this hand gesture, which is just a way to bring our minds into this ritual or this movement of mind, this karma, and actually sustain that vision that we were creating, that vision of a perfect world, and give it away like an offering. So saying, oh, okay, there's this thing that keeps bringing me to seeking wisdom, to finding answers, and asking yourself, what wouldn't I give to actually receive that? And then doing that in your mind, giving it away. Imagining that in that act, through that act, you could actually receive every answer that you and every being that you share your world with needs to hear. So I don't know, do I see Vicky and Marissa, would you like to do the honors again? It's so beautiful when you lead us. If you want to.
I was gonna volunteer Sarah and Adam for tonight.
In between bites.
Do we have a yay or a nay?
Sure.
Ooh.
Yay.
I'll change the screen for you when we get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sashi Poki Nukshin Metok Tram Rira Lingshin Yende Kepadi Sangye Shingu Mikte Utwarki Drokun Namdak Shingla Chupar Shok Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nirandayami Sangi Chudang Soki Choknam La Jangchu Bardu Dakni Kyabsu Chi Daki Chenyan Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sange Drupar Shok Sangye Churang Soki Choknam La Jangchu Bardu Daku Kyapsu Chi Daki Chenyan Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupar Shok Sangye Chudang Soki Choknam La Yangchu Bardu Daku Kapsu Chi Daki Chenyan Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupar Shok
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I actually thought we'd start with this review. I know I dropped it rather quickly last class, and I wanted to revisit it and review it maybe before or here. So basically what you're seeing here, for those who were here last week, this is a diagram that depicts the common steps in a path that takes a mind from delusion, confusion, at its source, ignorance, to freedom from those things. From A to Z, samsara to enlightenment. Before I launch in, any responses from last week, things that came up as you were thinking about this or mulling over it? Or should I just review? Okay, I'll take your silence as review. I hope you chime in as things come up. So we began talking about, before you even get to the path, the practice. Actually, we'll talk a lot about that tonight. Your Dharma practice. What is that? The path, the spiritual path that you've embarked on. Before that, there's pre-path, right? There's, and I think the way to think about that is remembering that for you, there was a time where you didn't need to question the status quo. I guess I won't assume that. Maybe, you were a inquisitive child and you were always coming up against the status quo, but at least for me, for the majority, like up until I hit a wall, I didn't have to question the status quo, primarily because it benefited me. You know, there were some ups and downs, but for the most part, I was like, oh, I understand. I will operate within the status quo. That is what I've been trained to do. So that's basically, I would categorize as pre-path. You usually then hit a wall, as I say, a metaphorical wall or not, but there's something that shakes you to your core that gets you to start asking, well, who put the status quo there in the first place? Why do I have to play by those rules? What do I do if it stops working? It's not seeming to benefit me anymore. That was my story. I was like, I got the Ivy League education. I got the great job. I have my New York apartment. I have the buzzy social life, but I'm not happy. Like, what's up with the status quo? It's not working for me anymore. So that's when you enter A, or path of accumulation, Soglam in Tibetan. And I think that the way to think about this is it's something that's interrupted that status quo, something that's interrupted that hypnosis that you've been in. So I hope you all can sort of think about that in your mind, what that moment could have been for you. Another realization that usually comes around there, at least this was for me, is that you get kind of sick of having to just think about yourself all the time. It was definitely that for me. I was like, I am so sick of just having to be trapped in this mind that can only think and take care of myself. And I can't even seem to do that very well, because that's not working. Like, I'm still in pain. So it kind of hits you. It doesn't feel good. It feels very unsettling, where you're like, wait a minute, this can't be it. It's really, when I look back on it, it's a blessing to get that sort of wake up call. But you have that wake up call, and you start entering what's called the path of accumulation, which is called accumulation because you begin collecting all the causes in your mind to ask the right questions. To ask questions like, where does my experience of the world really come from? What is my role in this world? What kind of person do I want to be? Those types of questions. Path of accumulation. I feel like we talked about that. The one I wanted to touch more on was Jorlam, the path of preparation, and what actually happens in that. Generally, in the path of preparation, it's sort of a couple of hallmarks that define your path of preparation. The way I would think about it is you've entered your existential crisis, and you found some sort of practice that is promising you to do something about it, right? I don't know what that is for you. Maybe it's not Tibetan Buddhism, but whatever it is, you found that practice, and it says, oh, here's a way to really get happy and stay happy, and maybe even help others get to that state. So you got the practice, you're entering this path of preparation. In this system, that period is marked by a few things. One, it's a lot of classroom hours. So like, if you've ever come to a Dharma class, you realize like, this is one class within one course of which there are 18. And that's just covering the open teachings, right? So there's a lot, you're gonna hear the pen thing or the explanation of karma and emptiness thousands of times. You're gonna get just raw classroom hours of hearing these things over and over again. You'll probably get to the point where your mind is like, oh, I've already heard that teaching. I don't need to hear the 4 laws of karma again. You get to that point, and you fight that voice because that's not true. But it's just massive amounts of classroom hours. That's one of the hallmarks of the path of preparation. It's also generally marked by a sense of ethics. Like, you wake up to the fact that ethics are a thing that no one's imposing on you. There's no list out there that's going to tell you what to do and what not to do. But there is a part of your mind that you start to befriend, which holds you accountable for the way you act in your world, the things you say, the things you do. So your sense of ethics gets clear. Perhaps you start to actually follow some sort of ethical code. It could be as formal as asking for vows. There's multiple sets. We just covered it in the last course, Bodhisattva vows, or Pratimoksha lifetime vows. And again, you can do this as a non-ordained person. It's not becoming a nun or a monk. Path of preparation. So classroom hours, ethics. You generally learn how to meditate here. You learn that it's possible to do that with your mind. Maybe you even recognize, like, it's weird to say I didn't think I had a mind. Obviously I knew I had one, but I very much thought it was my brain, right? It was so illuminating to me. I was sharing in the beginning, like I stumbled upon meditation. I stumbled upon a sign that told me I should try meditation on a lunch break from my job. And it was eye-opening to me because for those 20 minutes, honestly, one of my biggest takeaways from my first session was, oh, I don't have to think about myself or my own pain or existential drama for 20 minutes. Like that in itself was liberating, that, oh, there's this thing I call mind and I'm swimming in it and I can't even see it. I can't even see the water because I'm in it. So you begin to develop a practice of training your mind and habituating a certain state of mind. So that's also part of the path of preparation. Generally involves also finding a teacher, serving that teacher, asking yourself where that teacher comes from, how to keep them in your world. That might be related to even serving a spiritual center. So karma yoga, deciding what it is you want and helping other people get it. I don't know if anyone has seen Mackenzie's email signature lately, but it's enlightenment operations. And when I saw that, it made me think of Jorlam, or the path of preparation, where it's like you decide on top of your normal job to give yourself the job of all operations pertaining to the enlightenment of yourselves and others. And you get busy with that. Path of preparation. So you start to, let's leave it at that. So you're entering path of preparation. What are you preparing for? That should be a question, right? Jorlam, what are we preparing for? So that brings us to the Tonglam, or the path of seeing. I think I didn't know much about other spiritual traditions, I still don't, before meeting Tibetan Buddhism, but the more my appetite is whet and I kind of look around, I find that most every practice or tradition, it has some sort of peak experience associated with it. Some experience that is very hard to describe in words, and it's not an experience of experience and it's not it's not an experience of perceiver and perceived, right? It's not in that sort of duality, you could say. That's a loaded word, but it's something that you're just immersed in. It's that sense of rapture, like Hector says. That's what we're talking about in the path of seeing. So the words we use to describe it are the direct experience, the direct perception of emptiness. An explanation beyond something intellectual, a sort of conviction you get in your heart at that time because you're seeing something that's ultimate. There's no longer doubt. That's one of the hallmarks of that moment. It's short, it's 20 minutes, it's deep meditation, and you're out of the desire realm at that time. We've talked about all this. The idea is that it changes. It's not like something that gives you another, building block of intellect, right? Or another like experience to put in your pocket. It's something that actually changes your way of being. I've been thinking about that a lot because you know how we talk about like the types of beings, right? What does it mean to be a human being or an animal being? It's changing your sense of being in this path. You actually become a different type of creature, they say. But then you open your eyes, like we do when we come out of meditation, and you enter Gomlam, path of habituation. Gom, For those of you who've studied meditation with us, that's the Tibetan word for meditation, right? Gom, to habituate, to bring our minds to over and over again. And that's what we get to do here, right? You remember what it is you experienced in that Tonglang, the path of seeing. And you have this sort of conviction beyond intellect that it's true that there's an ultimate nature to absolutely everything. It's not like a hypothetical anymore. You know it to be true, even behind the belief or the non-belief that there's an ultimate nature. You realize there's an ultimate nature. And that truth changes the way you get to act in the world. So it's no longer a contrived sense of practice of, oh, I think I should meditate. I think I should do my 6 times a day book and keep my vows and serve my teacher, right? Like all those things. I think I should do my enlightenment operations to get to the goal. It's actually a sense of conviction. There's an ease that comes there. It's just flowing out of you. It's like that time in meditations, hopefully you felt it, where you're not trying so hard to stay on the object. Your mind just goes there. I don't know if you can all hear my laptop like freaking out. It's distracting me, but I'll try not to let it. Okay, good, so you're fine. One thing here, well, I sort of mentioned it with the belief or non-belief, something that's helped me is thinking about something like gravity. You know, we touched it in our meditation, that sense of gravity, that sense of groundedness. Gravity is exerting its force on you right now, whether you believe in it or not. That's why none of you are floating away. You don't have to believe in gravity for it to exert its force on you. That's like pre-path, sorry, that's like path of accumulation, path of preparation mind, you know, where you're like, maybe you believe it, maybe you don't, but it's exerting its force on you. And the way I think of path of habituation is you have some conviction in the truth of that force. I'm saying gravity, but think karma and emptiness, so that you can make it work for you. Right? When you understand the mechanics behind gravity, only then could you do an inversion in your yoga practice. Only then could we invent space flight or any type of flight. So are the mechanics of the way reality really functions working on you or the other way around? Question to ask yourself. And then this final path, the path of no more learning, or melop lam. Lam is being path here. So that's why you see it in each of them. So full Buddhahood, what we're talking about here in the Mahayana path. So a mind that's completely free, or actually, let me put it to you. What's full Buddhahood? What are the markers of that? Why are you here? What's Buddhahood? Anyone but Santi.
Enlightenment, freedom from suffering, or no, correct perception, to see everything as is. This might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The end of suffering, the permanent end of suffering.
Cool. So a couple of things there. Yes, there is a permanent cessation that happens in that stage of suffering inside and out. So firstly, it's a permanent cessation to your mental afflictions. Anything that bothers your mind, any moment of anger, jealousy, irritation, even mild annoyance, even like the little voice in your head that tells you to shift your seat because you're uncomfortable, gone, wiped from your mind. So that, or you could call that, that would be called nirvana, permanent cessation of mental afflictions. You also said eradication of suffering, or eradication of the causes for suffering. You don't see a world that's broken anymore. They say one of the qualities in a Buddha's mind, along with this unbearable compassion, is omniscience. We talked a little bit about this last week, but omniscience being not just, it does include this. It's not just I can speak every language, I can play every instrument, right? I know every detail of every molecular structure on the earth and beyond. It's that plus the real omniscience in a Buddha's mind is that they can go up or be encountered with any being, and they can tell them two very specific things. Does anyone know what that is? Or maybe you could say it's one thing. Anyone know what that is? What can a Buddha tell you? What's the only thing they can tell you? Tala, exactly what you need. Okay, yeah, that's one way to put it. I was looking for what to take up and what to give up. So that's how it's given in scripture. What a Buddha can do is tell you specifically, what are the things you need to start doing and what are the things you need to stop doing. Motivated, right, by compassion. Motivated by, hey, I want you also to wake up. I want you to get to this state as well. I can't make that happen for you. I can't change your karmas. Can't change the tune of your mind or the causes in your mind stream. But all I can do is teach you or try. And I'll show up in any way possible to tell you, here are the things you should do. And here are the things you should refrain from. What to take up, what to give up. And then, yes, Lynn, exactly. Then from there, you have your own experience. Don't trust my words. That Buddha actually says that, right? Don't do it just because I said it. Validate it with your own experience. Cut it with your logic and intellect. That is an important part of the path. And cross-reference it with other sources, right? Rub it, cut it, burn it. So why did I go through this? Yes, because I realized that at the end of last class, well, I liked that we sort of ended, at least for me, it felt like we ended like suspended in this sort of confusion almost. We got into this conversation of like, so what is it like in a Buddha's mind? How does the Buddha perceive a world, right? And I've been thinking about that so much. It's like, it's a beautiful contemplation. You can ask yourself every morning, what happened to the me that I was in my dream just now upon waking up, right? What happened to this pen when the dog perceived it as chew toy? Where did the pen go? So the reason I bring this up is because actually the meditation or contemplation associated with the last class, like class 8, was to meditate on the day that you will become a Buddha. So for those of you doing the homework or the quizzes and following along for certification, I hope you do this meditation and this contemplation. What will it be like? And so I put this here. Hopefully this feels intimately familiar at this point. We've gone through many details in this wheel of life, caught in the jaws of the Lord of Death, who will visit tonight. And then there you see a depiction of someone outside of the cycle. That's what, when I say Buddha, that's what I mean. Someone who's broken out of the cycle. Not just Shakyamuni Buddha, not just the OG. Someone who all they can do is point to the moon, point to this thing that represents ultimate wisdom and love, right? And they can just say, hey, here's how to get there. Here's what works. And then we, of course, get lost in the finger pointing so often, get lost in the various paths and practices, and we forget what they are actually pointing at. So I'm sharing that. Hopefully that is also a little mini review, maybe, of the course so far. I'll pause before we maybe go into the formal topic for this class, which is death meditation. Any questions there before we go on?
Yeah. Hey, Supriya.
Yes.
The question I have about is the 5 paths. The way you represented them in the picture on the slide, they almost look like stages. And I was wondering why they are called 5 paths, because path, the word, to me represents continuity. Like there is no end. It's just 5, like it just goes on. And I was wondering why not call them like 5 stages? Like, do each of these paths go on forever? Like, why is it paths and not stages is the question.
Yeah. I think actually a later point in class, we might get to something that addresses that. I think it's a great question because they're not linear. Like almost anything, once you start doing it, you realize it's never linear, right? So I think sometimes stages can, the translation of Lam is path. So it's also, a translation thing, but they're not linear in that, in a sense they are, but at least in certain phases, there's definitely, some loop-de-loops going on. So I think that's one thing to think about with paths, but I shared this with you, Vigya. I'll share it with the class as well. I'm not an expert in Sanskrit, but if any of you have studied the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, the line that actually encompasses that whole teaching, the 5 paths, is gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. And gate there, meaning gone beyond, to go beyond, that would be the translation for path. The thing that gets you to go beyond normal, beyond status quo, beyond appearances. And it's saying beyond, or gone beyond, gone beyond, right? So there I think direct perception of emptiness, where it's not just talking about the beyond, it's experiencing it. So you've gone beyond the beyond. Bodhisvaha. But yeah, I think there's a lot there. I mean, another thing that comes to mind is I think part of that line has to do with like going to the other shore, crossing the river, right? Metaphorical river being samsara or suffering or the way things appear. And the teaching that stuck with me is you take a boat to cross, right? The river, but then you also need to leave the boat behind. So there's an element of that too, I think, with paths. I guess it all boils down to none of those paths exist from their own side. None of them exist out there, right? Like you're not going to come up to the path and see a sign that says, hello, you've entered the path of accumulation. Come on in. Follow these signs. The paths are created from your own experience, your own interpretation. They're projections from your own mind. I'll leave it at that, but hopefully that gives you some fodder. Sarah and Adam, can you make the presentation slides the whole, so are they tinier than usual? The slides?
Yeah, I could see your desktop. So the whole thing is your whole desktop, and this presentation's like 60%.
Oh, I wonder if that's, okay, let me try this. Because usually I try to make you all most of my desktop. How about?
Priya, you can like share only the app. Like when you
No, that's what I usually do. I just have a new laptop, JJ. So I think that, oh wait, here, let's try this.
That's much better.
I think this should be even better. Is this good?
See?
Okay, great. And then I think I can still see you all.
Up it just, yep.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay, we have about an hour. This is good. Let us begin. So death meditation. I'm curious what you all think of when you hear those words together, death meditation. The first time I heard it, I basically thought it was like about Shavasana, right? Like, actually I've been thinking about like the sequence of a yoga class or a yoga practice a lot through this course, because I had this thought pop in the other day of like, oh, you know, when I'm practicing yoga, I'm sort of taking my mind through all the different realms. You know, I'm trying out, what is it like to be an animal when I do crow pose? And what is it like to be a warrior or a god or goddess when I do those, right? Like, if I'm doing something with my mind while I'm making shapes with my body, I am doing that. I'm taking my mind through all the realms, all these different ways of being. And then at the end, you get to practice dying, right? Or like me, maybe you think a little bit about what you want to eat for lunch, and then you remember that what you're supposed to be doing at that time is getting to practice dying. Practice what it would be like to actually dissociate from your sense organs, and then deeper than that, your personality, the narrative about who you think you are, or who society's told you need to be, and actually touch what would remain. That is a form, that is a practice. There is that type of death meditation in Tibetan Buddhism and many other traditions. That is not what we're talking about in these classes, or at least today and Thursday. And yes, Jing, to your question, meditate on what death would feel like. Exactly, that is what I'm talking about. That might be what comes into your mind when you think, oh, death meditation. What we're talking about in Tibetan, it's Chiwa, Drenpa, Gompa. Chiwa being death, Drenpa being remember, and Gompa, there's that word Gom again, like Gomrim, so Gom, meditation. Death, remember, meditation. That doesn't help too much either. What it's translating, but like the translation we can work with is a death awareness habituation. A habituation of being aware of death. Remembering that we are going to die. That's what we're going to be talking about. Anytime I say death meditation, it's just easier to say that than saying death awareness habituation. But that's what I mean. Getting used to thinking about the truth that we will die. Yeah, habituating the mind to the awareness of death. And it's actually even more than that. So basically, this doesn't just take place sitting on the cushion. It can, but that's not what we're talking about. It's not just sitting on the cushion, closing the eyes, having the posture. It's actually something you're doing all throughout the day. And the real flavor of it is to tell yourself, to know with certainty as you wake up, I am going to die at 6 p.m. today. Or let's say 10 p.m. so we can get through this class. I'm going to die at 10 p.m. today. Having that thought process throughout your day, anything you're doing, having the awareness, oh, I'm going to eat lunch and I'm going to be dying at 10 p.m. tonight. That, if you can habituate that or cultivate that, that is death awareness. That's what we're talking about here. Because it gets to, and we'll explore this throughout the whole class, it gets to radically shift your state of mind. Because if that were really a truth, if you held it to be a truth in your mind, you would have to ask yourself, what am I doing right now and why am I doing it? If you really, and this is important, it's not let me pretend I'm gonna die at 10 p.m. tonight, right? Let's say, maybe when I said that, you all thought I was sort of saying it for effect, right? Like hypothetically, maybe I'll die at 10 p.m. tonight. But like realistically, I'm young and healthy and I'm quarantined, like nothing's gonna happen to me. that's what I'm saying is, what would it be like to feel, to know, to decide, I am going to die at 10 p.m. tonight, and this is how I'm going to spend my attention, spend the precious currency of my attention. If you can cultivate that state of mind, that's what we're talking about here. Death meditation, death awareness, habituation. Chiwa Drempa Gompa. Yeah, you know you're gonna die today. Not, what if you knew you were gonna die today, right? That sounds hypothetical. That's not what we're talking about. So where does this come from? We've seen Je Tsongkapa before. This death meditation, it has 4 parts. We're gonna go through them. But it comes from the Lamrim Chenmo. So there you see that word again, Lam, path. Chenmo is great. So that's the great book on the steps of the path. It's considered one of the greatest texts in Tibetan Buddhism. It breaks down the entire A to Z path, from delusion to non-delusion, Lamrim Chenmo. It's this massive text. Je Tsongkapa wrote many Lamrims. This one's the longest, most comprehensive one. He also wrote one that's just 14 verses called The Source of All My Good. So he's very special. We owe a lot to him for the things that we get in ACI. And I know this is just another list of many lists that we've received so far. But what I'll ask is, what if, you know, maybe you're like me and after a while you're like, oh gosh, just another list, or let me see if I can memorize yet another list, right? And they just become numbered paragraphs. So what if it were really the case that this being called Je Tsongkapa had that peak experience, right? Had the realization, saw the true nature of how things really are. And out of a compassionate desperation to communicate that to us, was like, oh, cool, humans understand lists. Let me use lists to get to share this. Like, how else do you explain it? So I've been trying every list I see to sort of read between the lines and remember that it's a gift, it's an offering to get this knowledge in a digestible way like this. Right? It's always more than the list. I mean, if you've been on Instagram lately, everyone loves making lists out of other people's knowledge and hard work and insights. And that there's something reductive in that, but it's also beautiful in a way that it can really be shared. It could plant a seed for someone to then go explore more. Right? It could plant a seed for there to be awareness where there was no awareness. So our death meditation, or our death habituation, or our death awareness habituation, is going to have 4 parts. Each of them have their own parts. So we're gonna go over the first 3 definitely today and start the 4th one. So we're gonna go through what are the disadvantages of not cultivating death awareness, and then the advantages of doing so. Then this 3rd one, which I gave you a little teaser of, but what death awareness is and is not. And then, and only then, do we get to how to actually develop this death awareness. What do you actually do? And I'll perhaps try to give us a break in between here. I know it's not always easy to speak about death. Especially right now, it's so, I mean, it's always been a part of this world, but maybe it's more at the forefront for many of us, or the magnitude of it, or the tragedy of it. So I'll try to give a break as well in the middle of class, but thank you for being here and keeping your minds here. I think it's one of the most precious things we can do with our time right now, to ask ourselves these questions while we can. Especially if there's even a little part of your mind which is doing it with the motivation of then sharing this with someone else. Okay, so that first point, maybe I'll open it up to all of you before I give you the classical list. What do you all perceive any disadvantages with not thinking about the inevitability of death? That was kind of maybe a confusing double negative, but what would be the disadvantages of never considering the fact that you're going to die?
Not being able to prepare at all.
Yep.
Prioritize things that are not actually important.
Boom. I see in the chat, taking life for granted, you waste your time here. Not accounting for a most certain moment in one's life. Yes, yes, yes. Not thinking enough about the why we do things. Beautiful.
It makes me think about you won't think what it is to live if you don't think about death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tala, I think that's related to what she just said, attaching to things for the wrong reasons. Cool, so we have a sense of this, and I'm sure you do. That's part of why you came to this class. So I'll go through it's in this classical list from Je Tsongkapa, there's 6 disadvantages to not cultivating death awareness. So the first one is that you get seduced by the small pleasures of life and you don't practice. So small pleasures of life here very simply refer to food, Instagram. I mean, Je Tsongkapa didn't say Instagram, but I'd say that would be included, right? Like food, clothing, personal wealth, things that, small potatoes, the things that everyone seems to value, that seem to run society, the small pleasures of life, and you don't practice. So here, code word, you don't practice Dharma. And I want to be clear here what that means. It's not saying you don't practice Tibetan Buddhism, right? You have to talk about what Dharma actually means if it's true that Dharma, like everything else, is a projection from your own mind. So here when we say Dharma, in Sanskrit, that word, the root, like dur, it comes into English like in words such as endure, or yeah, that's the one that comes to mind. But it's this idea of something that sustains you. And something that is inherent or is held up in every single existing thing. This truth that underlies all things, this Dharma. So what I would take away from this first thing, get seduced by the small pleasures of life and don't practice. So the thing here, whether or not you think of it, or you think this way, you do have a practice. Whether or not you think, oh, here's my spiritual practice, but you are practicing something, right? The things that the voice in your head, the thoughts you repeat over and over, there's your mantra practice. Or the things you believe will make this body run, there's your yoga asana practice. The things that you focus on and you repeat over and over again, the things you keep bringing your mind back to, there's your meditation practice. You will have a practice, whether you know it or not. I did too. I just didn't call it that. I called it being a functioning member of society, doing the things I thought I was supposed to do. You have a practice. The idea here is saying those seemingly small things they are quite seductive. They pull you in and they become your practice, right? Getting more of those things, getting more of the money or more of the followers or more of the leisure time, that becomes your practice. And you never get to the Dharma. You never get to that wake up moment of there's something else going on here. Okay, the second disadvantage of not cultivating death awareness, it's that you consider death, but you always think it'll happen later. So, I mean, I identify with this a lot because I'm 26. And so, yeah, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll think about death, but it's not going to happen to me tonight. Or in a small way, you know, it's the things you put off from day to day. Oh, I'll break that habit tomorrow. I'll send that email tomorrow. I'll get to my cushion tomorrow. That thing you put off that you say, oh, well, I'll do it later, thinking that later really will come. So I feel like quarantine has been a big wake-up call, at least for me with all this, because there were a lot of things that I said to myself, I'll do them when I have time. Like I'll do them when I don't have to commute to my job and I don't have to clean my apartment. You know, I'm getting to live in my parents' beautiful home, like everything taken care of for me right now. And it's a great wake-up call in that that later time has come, right? Here I am with all the time in the world. I don't have to commute. I don't have to do so many of my normal things. And have I yet made a dent in those habits? Right? Like how much am I just perpetuating that mindset of, yeah, I'll do it later. I'll have time for that later. The idea being, if you really have death awareness habituation, you really feel like there is no later, right? It's just right now. It clarifies everything. It electrifies everything. You actually begin to treasure your time. So the idea being, if you really think death will come to you later, then all the things you know in your heart of hearts that you want to do before that time, you'll just put them off. So that's one of the disadvantages of not having that death awareness. Give me a moment, please. I'm going to pause. I unfortunately can't see the chat. It's really interesting in this class about death. All of my electronic devices are slowly dying in battery. I'm usually like way more prepared. I'm going to pause. I can't see the chat. So any questions or comments, have they come up?
Not in the chat. I think everyone is fixated on what you're saying.
Okay, great. My notes are about to die. So it's a real-time lesson for me. Okay, third disadvantage of not believing or deciding that you are going to die at 10 p.m. tonight and then acting that way. They say that you will do a practice, you'll do your practice, but for reputation only. So this is subtle. It's not saying, I think Je Tsongkapa knew, and we all know, it's not about getting famous, right? That's not what it means with reputation only. I think having a Dharma practice isn't going to be your route to fame. This is talking about something more subtle, which is so Geshe-la put it very directly, and it's harsh, but I think it's true. At least it's true for me. He said, there is not a single thing that I do that is not infected with my own self-interest. There's not a single thing I do that's not infected with my own self-interest. Even the most altruistic, open-hearted thing I could try to do, you know, there's a little part of me that's like, okay, do they like my slides? Can they tell how hard I worked on them? Right? Like there's something, it's just ingrained in us. I mean, think about how many times you felt hungry and responded to your own hunger relative to truly feeling the hunger of someone else the way a mom feels it for her baby. Like, it's 1,000,000 to 1. The amount of moments that I spend just thinking about myself, taking care of myself, looking at the world through the vantage point of myself. And self is a loaded word here. Here we're talking self-interest, selfishness. If you want to get more subtle, it's called self-cherishing in Tibetan Buddhism, right? This compulsion we have to think of ourselves, to cherish ourselves and take care of us in that way. But at its core, self-existence. Thinking that there is some unchanging, solid, self-existent self inside me that I have to hang on to, that I have to protect, that I have to adorn with this personality. And forgetting over and over again that that's not true. Like, it's very easy for me to remember that my mind is almost nothing like it used to be, right? But that even goes for my body. I think it's like every 7 years, all of your cells completely turn over. Like, you are literally at the even most molecular atomic level, not the same being that you were a few years ago. There's a through line, I'm not saying there's not, but the thing that we think that is always there, that we have to work so hard to protect, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist self-existently. Because if it were true, all of you would be having the same experience of me right now. And I know you're not from your faces. Some of you are really into this, some of you are not, some of you I don't know, I can't see your face. But you're not, I'm not self-existently Supriya. I am a blank screen onto which you are forced to project an experience. And that experience, it's actually a product of your mind. It's a product of how you've listened to teachings before. It's a product of your motivation. My job, this is not my job, but my honor is I just get to show up. And I'll be whatever you need me to be. But I got lost. What are we talking about here? If I don't think about the facts, if I don't decide that I'm going to die at 10 p.m. tonight, I might do my practice, but it will be infected with doing it for the sake of approval or the sake of appearances. What else do I have to say here? It says this tendency of self-cherishing or self-existence-ness, it's always there, but it becomes worse if I don't get used to thinking about the death of me. Right? If I think about how everything that I work so hard to identify as Supriya, my personality, my aesthetic, all of that, if I forget, if I don't remind myself every day that that must come to an end, then of course I'm going to get attached to it. How could I not? So that's one aspect of it. I also want, when possible, to give the positive side, which is that the thing that came to mind here for me was the early days of encountering Dharma. So for me, at least, I was still at my job. I had my roommates in my apartment. I had my social life, and it was completely like a secret inner world that I was creating. I was not ready to come out of the closet as a Buddhist. I was not like wearing a mala or, talking about karma and emptiness over the dinner table. I was just like keeping it all inside. It was too bright. It was too exhilarating. I had no idea how to express it. And it was a beautiful feeling because it wasn't yet infected with how do people see me as a Dharma practitioner? How do people see me as a meditator or a meditation teacher? Right? It didn't have any of that. It was like this little secret world. I think of it like, I don't know if any of you have ever spent a birthday like in a foreign country. Like I was once on a business trip to London for my birthday, and I had the best day because I didn't have to tell anyone it was my birthday. Like it was just this little secret that I could walk around on a cloud and, you know, do these cool secret things and not have to explain it to anyone. And that felt like, that really did feel like Dharma practice for so long before that self-interest became infected into it. And I have to fight it all the time. Am I practicing so it looks like I'm practicing, or am I practicing to shift something internally for real? So that's the third disadvantage. Do I need to check the chat? Any activity going on there? Oh no, I need to speed up a little. Chat. Okay. Thanks. Oh my gosh. It's just on. Yeah, thank you. Okay, give me a moment so that everything doesn't die. No, you're good. I'm here. Sorry, I'm running out of battery karma, but we're good. Okay, so we're on there's 6 disadvantages in total. So the fourth one is you do your practice, but you do it without enthusiasm. So anyone who's done a practice or started something, which, you know, in the beginning, they were like totally in love and enamored by it, and it was changing their world. At a certain point, it probably lost its shine a little bit. You know, like when I used to go to the meditation cushion, and it was like, it was a big moment. Like it was exalted. I was like scared to sit on my cushion, and like, you know, it was that like hot in my mind of what I was about to do. And often now it's very different. I have to drag myself to the cushion. It is not exhilarating. So if we neglect to bring our minds to the inevitability of death, you actually lose that enthusiasm. You lose that fervor. I think of this also for those of you who've studied the 6 perfections. You lose joyful effort, right? You're going along, you're serving your Dharma center, you're serving your teacher, you're doing your practice, and it's become normal. Or it's become something you do because you like the people, right? But that zest isn't there. That thing that charged you up in the beginning of, wow, if it's true that the world only has the meaning that I place on it, not by choice, because then of course you'd want everything to be perfect. It only has the meaning that I place on it, and that meaning, where does it come from? It has to come from somewhere. I'm experiencing the world. Well, you're forced to then examine that birthplace of the meaning, right? And you realize that it all comes down to mind. It all comes down to consciousness. Then the flavor with which you do anything matters, right? If you've studied karma, the emotion with which you plant karmic seeds matter. So here, I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Yeah, it's just you fall for the ritual of things. It's like you're doing the mandala offering, you're making the gesture, you're saying the words, but you're forgetting the meaning. You're not actually having that vision in your mind. So you're doing it without enthusiasm. Second to last disadvantage of not cultivating death awareness habituation, according to Je Tsongkapa, is that you get entrenched deeper into this life. So I think the best example of this, I see it with my parents now that I'm home, or with, you know, people that have lived a life with certain habits or with certain models about how the world is, including how they are, how they see themselves. If you've noticed, as they get older, those models become like calcified. right? They become even more solid and real. It's like the trope of the angry old man who's like, get off my lawn, right? And it's like years and years of that habit then creates this world around him where like, yeah, there are people that are out to bug him and just, you know, Mackenzie's laughing. I think I'm not sure if this metaphor is landing, but they're confirming their own biases and their own models with how tight they're holding on to them. They're getting entrenched deeper and deeper into the way they think things are, the way things appear. And so if you don't remember death every day, every moment, you get sucked in deeper to all the things that want to distract you from death. Right? All the things that say, yeah, come over here, get busy with this stuff. And the other point here that they say is that the more you get busy trying to make yourself happy with things outside of you, right? The more you get busy trying to make yourself happy with money or relationships or fill in the blank, whatever your get happy hack is. If you've ever tried this before, you realize that your tolerance level is going to keep getting higher, right? Maybe first it was for me, right? It was the really nice apartment with the lofted bedroom. And then my tolerance level got higher. And the next apartment, I wanted an attached bathroom. And now that I've lived in that apartment, I'm like, I have to do better. I can't just go back to, you know, a normal apartment. Whatever you're right, that threshold keeps getting higher. Maybe it's your salary level or your position at work. If you're thinking that that's where validation is coming from or happiness is coming from, the bar is going to keep getting raised. And so then you're going to get entrenched deeper trying to meet that. Okay, there's one more. Final one, disadvantage of not cultivating death awareness, having intense regrets at the time of death. So this moment will come, it's inevitable. I don't know if you've ever witnessed anyone who's not had to die. And at that time, they say if you haven't created the habit of thinking about death with the conviction of it's going to happen to me, not just hypothetically, then you will have intense regrets about the way you lived your life at that time. This one's not too hard to buy. I mean, I think I saw it on Instagram the other day. It was like an end of life caretaker or a hospice worker or something who was sharing like the top 5, you know, regrets that I've heard from the people I've served at the time of their death. And they all had the same flavor to them, right? One of the top ones was, I wish I hadn't spent as much time doing what others expected of me, right? I wish I had followed my heart rather than done what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Things like that. But the idea is that at that moment, regrets will come up. All those things you're like sweeping under the rug or putting in the closet or telling yourself, later I'll deal with that. Later I'll deal with that tendency that I have or that bridge I haven't repaired. At that moment where you realize absolutely everything is being ripped away from you, those things are going to come up. They'll come up as these intense regrets, which, as we've talked about with the karmas being so strong at the moment of death, right? Those will have a result. The way I think about it, recently I'm preparing to travel, so I've been like trying to peel the labels off of bottles to then, you know, reuse them. And it's the difference between like a bottle where the label comes off cleanly versus one where you have to like really scrape at it or like use Goo Gone to get it all off. Like it's attached so strongly, it's so sticky on there. And I was thinking about that here, like a mind that's racked with these regrets, with these, I should have done this, I could have done this, right? No clarity about what to take up and what to give up. A mind that's racked with those regrets, that stickiness, it's so sticky. It's so attached, it's so hard to peel off that label. But the label's going to come off. It has to come off. So I've been thinking about that a lot. That helps me remember this one, intense regrets. This was something important that came up with this particular one. The commentary here is that the reverse is also true. As in, certain decisions that maybe you're making now as a result of your Dharma that might seem odd or strange or unusual or against the status quo, you'll have, as you near this final moment, a sense of joy that you really did make the right choice. By remembering death all the time and acting in that way, you remove the probability for future regret, because you become really clear about what it is that's actually important to you. So you actually get to die cleanly, and those decisions based on Dharma of what to take up, what to give up, right? There's none of that I should have flavor in your mind, because you lived each day as if it was, you decided that it was your last day and you lived it that way. So I'll pause here before we move to the advantages of cultivating death awareness. How is this landing for you? And I'm sorry for all my fidgeting. Feel free to unmute yourself and just chime in.
I think hi, it's JJ. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yep, we can.
I think it's so like, I feel like every time I hear it, I feel super inspired, but it's the practice, I guess, is like the practice is keeping that awareness. The habituation is the term here. That's the key term, I think. Like, I'm aware of all of this and I hear it, and each time I hear it, I'm like, I want to share this information with everyone, and I hope we all get to, you know, really live the day to the fullest and do the things that are meaningful. And but then like you get caught up on other things and then you forget. So it's that the habituation is the word, I think, not only in this death awareness, but everything else, meditation, all the practices that should be, we should be habituating, you know, just to habituate the habituation is the key, and the hard part.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like I've heard this teaching like probably a dozen times now, and every time it like shakes me and I'm like, yes, I am now going to begin doing proper death awareness habituation. Like every time I'm like, yes, of course. It's so hard to argue with this. It's so clear. And I'll do it for maybe a week or two. And then I'm back to the hypnosis, right? I'm back to the status quo. Like you have to fight this. So it is exactly that. So you have to hear it over and over. And it's slowly chipping away at that part of your mind that tells you that you're normal, or that tells you that you have more time to figure this stuff out. It is. So that I think is really healthy, to just love and train that muscle, and be a little easy on yourself, but not too easy.
Something that I think about is how How sometimes at first this idea of thinking about death every day it can create like a sense of urgency, which I think it even said in the reading is important. But to realize that if you were dying tonight at 10 p.m., like that, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's like a quality to urgency that is also not what the point of your last day in this planet should be. So even if it is, if this is your only day, it doesn't mean to be living like, I don't have enough time left and I got to get this done and I'm going to get this done and I haven't done enough. Ultimately, it's not about cultivating urgency as much as cultivating whole acceptance of present moment and like I almost think of it like tentacles that go out from the whole body, like living in your wholeness in that one moment, rather than again applying this more like capitalist desire realm view to I have one day left, carpe diem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, you described it so beautifully, and I felt it the first time I actually tried to put this into practice. I was very shook because it was like a normal weekday, and I thought what my mind would do would say, okay, let me go to the airport, buy a one-way ticket to Mumbai because it's my favorite city in the world, and I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do all the things on my bucket list.
Yeah. Right.
And you're right. If you really set out into the world with this in your mind, that's not what you end up doing. Like I did end up just getting on the Q train, getting to work, having lunch, going to the 3 Jewels for my lunch break, going back to work. But the quality of it was so different than right?
Yeah.
What I was saying is every moment was electric.
Right.
Why am I eating this bite? Why am I sending this email? Why am I taking this step? Knowing that with this hyper awareness that what I was doing was creating imprints on my mind that must have a result.
Yes. This also reminds me of the intersection and like lack of difference between space and time, and how it's all about attention actually. And just like what you just described of doing exactly what you've been doing in a way, but having a completely different quality to it. It makes me think about something Wendell Berry, I don't know if anyone knows Wendell Berry, I'm sure many of you do. Wendell Berry said about land and home, the idea of home, that to truly honor the land is not about visiting all the lands. It's not about going to every place. It's actually about rooting down into one place, the place where you are, and living that place fully. Like there is an infinity inside of a grain of sand, and you could go so deep into your one area that you could just forever be unfolding. What is this plant? What is this plant? What is this smell? That in and of itself is enough. And so like this moment is enough as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I hope if there's anything you take away from this class, it is to just try that. Like try it tomorrow. Wake up and see if you can, maybe it won't be your first thought, but your second or third thought. Tell yourself what time of day, tomorrow, Wednesday, you will die. And just see and then let your day unfold. Maybe it'll come back to you a few times, but yeah, I think Marissa, based on what you just said, triggered a memory for me where one of my impulses while practicing death awareness habituation was just to quit my job. Where I was like, well, if it's, like, if really today is my last day, I don't want to be at my office and then just be consulting, digital strategy for brands. Like, what am I doing? And I even went to my teacher and I was like, I'm ready to leave it all behind for Dharma. Like, you just tell me what to do. I'll quit my job. And of course, my teacher said, great, please quit your job by staying at your job. Code, right? Please quit the way you think about your job. Please quit the aspect of your job that you think is coming from the job. The boringness, the capitalism, the whatever it is. Quit that part of seeing the job that way. Because otherwise, if I'm just rearranging the pieces, quitting one job and going and doing something else, the same problems are going to crop up. If karma and emptiness are true, right? If those patterns of seeing the world in a certain way are already in my mind, they're going to assert themselves in any situation I walk into. Until I examine the root cause within my own mind, they'll always be there. I'm just changing the scenery. So yeah, there's so much you can learn about yourself just try it for a day. Wake up and tell yourself you're gonna die. When you don't, it's a beautiful moment. Then you really get to wake up that next day with your eyes and feel grateful for the day. You know how people say to like do that in the morning? Feel grateful that you're opening your eyes and living. It's much easier to do that if you really, the night before when you went to bed, told yourself you were gonna die. And you could just surprise yourself being like, whoa, cool, I got another day. All right, let's keep going. So we have another list, but remember the magic between the items in the list. So now we've done the disadvantages, now the advantages of cultivating this state of mind. So number one, they say your practice is pure. We sort of touched upon this, but the idea is here, basically you're doing it for the right reasons. You're not doing it because of what someone else thinks or even what they've told you to do, right? For a long time, I thought Dharma practice was, well, for a long time, I thought it was getting 100% on all my ACI homeworks and quizzes. And I was like, cool, that correlates to enlightenment. And very quickly realized that's not the case. But then I spent a good amount of time trapped in the hypnosis that making my teacher happy was the way to get enlightened, right? Like getting my teacher's approval rather than society or my parents or anything. Then I'll get enlightened. So all of that you have to, for me, or actually I shouldn't say that because I don't know if it was just cultivating an awareness of death because I haven't done that too properly. But if you were really to do this, I think all those things would fall away. And you have this purity around why it is you're doing what you're doing. You don't actually care what others think or how you seem or for their approval. And the idea is that this actually improves your practice. So that brings us to the second advantage here, where your practice actually gains some power. They say, if you do it with a sense of death in mind. Oh yeah, here, this helps me. So this is from Master Shantideva, the most known for the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, or the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so there's a story he tells in there, which is, if you were to hold a bowl of water, like filled to the brim, and be told to walk across the room and not spill a single drop, you probably could do it, but you wouldn't pay too much attention, right? And you might drop a drop or two. But if you were to do that same thing and they said that someone were to follow you and hold up a knife to your throat and cut if even a single drop were to fall, then you would probably do it. Not even probably, you would do it, right? When you have that sort of pressure, that sort of looming sense of something right behind you, you actually get the power to do a lot more than you thought you could do. And they say that's one of the purposes of the awareness of death. If you always get the sense that the Lord of Death is right there, right? Just following me, right? Not that far away. You actually get the power to do the things you maybe otherwise told yourself you can't do. So that's, the practice gets power. Something specifically that came up here in the commentary was that and whatever your practice is, and here they were talking about your meditations, let's say you're trying really hard to visualize something. You're able to get the power that you need to do that. If you were to really think, okay, this is my last meditation. I've been sitting here, I'm trying to do my preliminary practice and visualize my teacher. get all the details right, if you were to think that way, this is my last practice, you would actually do it. It's almost like you'd will it into happening. That's practice gets power. Another advantage here is it actually helps you get started. So, often we start meditation classes with this where, you acknowledge that the hardest thing to do is to get to the cushion, right? Or the hardest thing to do is to get to the mat. Once you've gotten there, you're already started. The idea here that, what's the idea here? Okay. So part of it is that, where it's like that push that you need to just get your butt to the cushion, right? To begin your practice. But then more than that, what they were talking about here is, trying to see if this makes sense. Helps you get started. Oh, okay. If you're anything like me, there's a tendency of, you'll make a million excuses to yourself as to why you can't do the thing you're supposed to do or that you really want to do, right? Like, oh, I'll do it once all my emails are sent, or I'll do it when I'm no longer hungry, or I'll do it at this time of day. So the idea here being, if you were to really have a awareness of death and habituate that, you'd recognize that your personal practice is more important than any obligation you've made to anyone else. And you'd always prioritize that. Like, it wouldn't be hard to get up early and meditate before you go to work. Or it wouldn't be hard to turn down that invitation at night, knowing that you need to get up early the next day and meditate before you go to work. So it helps you get started. I think part of that, and this is personal commentary that I'm just adding, I think it also helps your mind ask the questions that really matter. If you think about just generally starting, how do I start a practice? How do I start a spiritual practice? How do I start a relationship with the teacher? I think if you were to have this awareness of your own death in mind, it's much harder to fool yourself. So also related here too, it keeps you going strong. So this actually, yeah, it's kind of related to your question in the beginning, Viggy, where, maybe we think a path, that it's like this linear upward sloping trajectory. Like, I'll just start and then I'll just keep getting better and it will keep getting easier, and then enlightenment. Boom. And you think once you're in it, you're in it. And there's a certain truth to that, but the path itself, it's more of like an upward squiggle with lots of roundabouts and, some dead ends and some loop-de-loops on the way. So there are going to be times where your practice feels easy and effortless, and there's going to be times where there's friction. And having an awareness of death, habituating it, the idea is that it keeps you going strong. So it keeps up the consistency, it keeps up the effort you need to defeat your biggest mental afflictions. It allows you to maintain that practice even when the world around you seems to be falling apart. To put it into some modern day context. Okay, then the next advantage of cultivating an awareness of death is it gets you to the end, they say. So, oh yeah. So, they were talking here specifically about a retreat experience, but I think it applies to many things. The idea here is that, like, in any practice that you do, probably there's some mark that you hit where you sort of, like, you can taste the end, right? It's almost there, but you don't have the energy you need to get there. Like, maybe 75% of the way through the yoga class, you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to go into child's pose now. Or like in a retreat setting, I'd say this happens, yeah, like 75% of the way through, for example. Like, we're planning a big retreat right now, and I was working on the menu with a friend, and we were talking about, like, yeah, once we hit that 75% mark, it's going to be hard. So we were like, great, we'll add like a soup or something to lunch to, just keep everyone's spirits up. Like add a little treat to dessert, because it gets hard. So the idea being, if you can cultivate an awareness of death, and I think part of this is you get shaken out of the misconception that you need to feel good in order to practice, or that practice itself needs to feel good or make you feel good. You get to shake out of that once, if it's about life and death, and you can actually get to the end of it. And then this mirrors the disadvantage, but it's the flip side of that is you get to die with a sense of satisfaction. You get to die with that sense of no regrets, of, oh, I really did do the right thing with my life, right? If it's true that Dharma is this pursuit of the highest truth, and in its ultimate form is living your life at the service of others, then the way your life unfolds confirms for you that you made the right choice. And especially at the moment of death. Well, it goes both ways. It's like, one, at the moment of death, you've probably lived a really beautiful life, if that's the case, because you've reaped the results of taking care of others. But also, when things are hard or when things fall apart, you're not too rattled because because you're very used to the idea of things coming to an end. You've habituated death awareness. So you're not rattled as much. So there's this ease, and the fact then when death does come, that itself confirms for you that Dharma is the way to live your life, right? When it becomes true that everything everyone was saying in these classes, that, oh, I must lose my personality, I must lose everything I work so hard to gain, whatever it is, the zeros on the paycheck, the letters after the name, I don't know what it is for you, but all of it, oh yeah, they're right, it really must go. There's nothing I can do to keep it. That in itself, that satisfaction of, oh, I kept that in mind and I lived my life that way, allows you to die with a sense of satisfaction.
Supriya, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, death, like the fact that death is going to happen, and like the wish for enlightenment after this life, it feels a little bit like I'm like feeding off the sustenance of hope. And that feels like it's attached to the desire realm, like something that would keep me here. So how do I make that separation?
Yeah, it's beautiful because every class someone asks this question, like, it sounds like I have to die. You're telling me, on the one hand, you're telling me it's possible to escape all suffering, including the suffering of having to die. And on the other hand, you're telling me I have to prepare for death. So which is it? Right? And so a couple of things. One, what to think about here, it's impossible to use the transformative moment of death, because that is what it is. It's just a transformation, but it's impossible to use that moment in a truly transformative way, right? In a way that actually changes your whole being and projection of yourself and your world. It's impossible to actually use that moment, which is so fraught and so disorienting, if you haven't first habituated a death awareness. Or put in other words, you have to live as if you were going to die every day in order to truly defeat death or transcend the experience of having to die. Because that is what we're talking about. And we're going to get there, maybe not today, but deathlessness is actually the minimum goal of Buddhism. Nowhere in the scripture is it saying this is about getting calm, alleviating anxiety, having better interpersonal relationships. Those are all beautiful goals and important, but complete and utter deathlessness is the goal. And so, yes, so to your question, Mackenzie, it does seem contradictory, and in that friction, keep going. Yeah. Let me decide, okay. We have a few moments. Oh, I do want to address this question, and then we'll figure out, you know, between today and Thursday, finishing up the content. But Lynn, your question, now that we can learn to acknowledge and appreciate death as a part of life, how should we comfort people when their beloved ones die without reinforcing the mentality that death is horrible or should be avoided? Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for asking that. I'll share a quick story, which is where my mind went when I saw this question. It was actually after a retreat experience. So usually after Three Jewels retreats, which we practice completely in silence, we have a few days together afterwards where we can speak and contextualize a little bit and be like, what happened? You know, how was that for you? And so this was on one of those days post-retreat, and I was in charge of dinner. If you know me at all, I'm a bit of a tyrant in the kitchen. I don't allow sous chef, so I was alone in the kitchen making dinner. Everyone was off to the sunset on the beach, but my teacher was there as well, Hector. And he was going through some health stuff at the time, so I sort of had that in my mind, but he came to me and he completely level-headed, like completely, you know, even voice. He was glowing and as joyful as usual, started describing to me the symptoms of what, if you were to Google them, would be a stroke. He was like, I'm experiencing this in my mind, this tingling up and down my arm, you know, it runs in my family. It's happened to me also a few times before, like just explaining this all to me. And of course I'm freaking out. That's where my mind goes. And it was this lesson. I was like, what am I supposed, like, what should I do? What do I call the ambulance? Like, what do you want me to do? I'm running around. And he's very clear with me. He was like, no, there's nothing you can do. If you had listened to me in class about death awareness meditations, you would remember that. But there's absolutely nothing you can do. All you can do actually is, do you have some sort of scripture with you? You know, and I happen to have the Source of All My Good, that short Lamrim by Je Tsongkapa. It's a note in my iPhone. I was like, I have the Source of All My Good, and he's like, okay, well, you know, I know what practice I need to do, but if something were to happen, if you could just sit next to me and just read that, because if you read it, it'll help my mind, even the most like tenderly parts of my mind, right, go towards the Dharma. Remember the truth, remember the teachings at that moment. So he's like, if anything were to happen, just sit next to me and just read that from your iPhone. That's all you can do. There's nothing else you can do. So there's a lot of teachings in that moment for me, but one of the main ones is that a beautiful way to serve a mind is to, serve a mind that's transitioning at that time, is to bring that mind towards what it deems to be the highest goodness, the highest truth. Right? So if you're with someone and for them, their whole life has been about, you know, they have some sort of spiritual or faith-based tradition, right? If like the Mother Mary, you know, and it's like their whole life has been about that, well, bring up the Mother Mary at that moment for them. Allow their mind to go towards something that brings them solace, and not just something external. A beautiful way to serve them would be to allow them to go down memory lane of all the ways in which they took care of others, all the ways in which they did virtue in their life, right? Did these beautiful, selfless things, moments of kindness, secret moments of goodness, working for others. If you can do that, they say you're moving their mind towards positivity that will have a result. And it's helping them move away from that sticky label, right, of all the things that they might otherwise have a tendency to hold on to, right? Maybe there's a part of their mind that is still distressed with the state of their finances. Well, that's going to go. No point being attached to that. Or a part of their mind that's distressed by the way they look or seem. That's going to go. So just remove that from their mind. Bring their mind towards the highest virtue that they have, that they've done. And they say that's true even for people who have passed. So once they've passed, think about the beautiful things they've done in their life as a way to almost guide that mind as it navigates the bardo state towards its own virtue. So I hope that helps. And we're a little over, so here's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna do this next time, death meditation, what it is not, and the three aspects of it. We'll have plenty of time to go through that, so don't worry, to be continued as it says here. Well, actually, I wanna make an important announcement before we dedicate, and then we'll dedicate. And if you have to run, just please mentally dedicate. The announcement I want to make, just because it just went live and it's already filling up, which is really exciting, but I want you all to know about our upcoming meditation teacher training, which will take place live. Oh, sorry, live. Yes, that's true. But online, I mean, it could involve in-person components if that's safe and feasible, but it will be completely designed and optimized for online. It begins October 2nd here, the details. There's a whole web page on it on 3 Jewels, which has a lot more detail. I highly, highly recommend it. So I just wanted to put it out there, just talk to, oh, Lynn, I'm so happy to hear that. But yes, talk to me or Tala, Mackenzie, Diego, who else is here? Sam is here. Jing has done one of our trainings. If you're at all interested and you want to hear their perspective, I'm sure they'll give it to you very openly. But it is taught by Hector. Hector is the lead teacher. So anytime you've heard me say my teacher, that's who I'm talking about. I should just use his name, not be creepy. But Hector's the lead teacher. There'll be amazing guest teachers as well. It's a beautiful, very comprehensive program. It draws on the wisdom from ACI. So especially if you're vibing with Dharma at 3 Jewels, this is a beautiful way to go beyond the lists and internalize it as your own wisdom, as your own realizations. Oh, and I want to share, I'll put it in the chat. If you use this code, which is just my name, you get $100 off. So please share it far and wide. And on top of that, we do have, we have scholarships available for BIPOC folks as well as LGBTQIA. I hope I communicated that correctly, but we have a variety of scholarships available. You'll find that in the application itself. So as you fill it out, you'll have an option to indicate that. So recommend, like if you yourself don't, qualify for that, recommend someone who you know who would. Okay, with that, we'll dedicate. Thanks for staying a bit. Sarah and Adam, will you take us away?
Surely. Sashi Puki Jukshin Mektok Tram Vira Lingchi Nyinde Genpadi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Uwagi Rokun Namdak Shingla Trupar Shok Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nurivayantayami Kewa Di Kewa Kum Sunam Yeshe Sokzakshin Sunam Yeshi Lejum Wei Dampa Kunyi Topar Sho.
Thank you all. Thanks for bearing with my technical difficulties and also this difficult topic. I mean, I don't know how it landed for you all, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to get to relearn it and remind myself what death awareness habituation is, because I have heard this same class before and it hit my heart and it changed me and then I forgot again. So I get to remember every time because of you all. So it's hard to express how grateful I am. And we're gonna finish up on Thursday. So just know that's coming. I won't leave you hanging with the 4 parts of the death meditation. I'll stick around for any questions, or if you just want to chat, I have a few minutes.
Hey, Supriya.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question on the last slide that we covered today, which was the advantages of cultivating an awareness of death. I struggle with getting to the end of projects. Like I often make my way to like 80%, and the last 20% tends to be a drag for me. And I don't like. I'm gonna try the death meditation, but I don't understand. I really don't understand why an awareness of death would help me finish, like get me to the end.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's not one of those things that can be understood before experience. So I'm open to that as the answer, but I'm just curious, like if at all there is any like logic presented, as is often in like Buddhist scriptures on this point. And I was like practicing a little bit right now towards the end of the class, just like thinking, okay, I'll die in like 20 minutes. And I really felt like cool. Like I didn't feel like a desire to finish any of my projects. And I'm curious how that works.
Yeah. I'll just share like from my personal experience. I've learned a lot by catching my, like the first 10, 15 minutes of my meditation, the thing that inhibits my mind from settling into meditation, right? So for me, it's always the outstanding items on my to-do list. That's like a 50% of it. That's one of the reasons I can't focus. And the other one is usually, it's that flavor of, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't acted that way. So those are the primary things that keep me, at least, from settling into meditation. So I've gotten very used to identifying that, and a big motivator for me to clean those things up is so that I can actually meditate. So I can actually get to a state of mind that's more subtle than all of those, and much more enjoyable to be in. So that's one answer I'll give, is the release that comes from not having anything left on your plate. or it's a practice. It's like, even when you go into meditation, the ultimate preparation, like it's what I'm doing right now, is you actually prepare to die as you go into meditation. Into retreat. Like, you get all your affairs in order. All my bills have been paid. I've also been looking into writing a will, like Santi was saying. It's like, you actually try to imagine, what if I didn't come back? I don't want anyone else to have to deal with the things I left behind. I don't want it to have to fall on anyone else. You clean up your act. So that practice has helped me. But the other thing that's implied in death awareness habituation is that the things that perhaps aren't important to the core of you, those also will fall away. You'll get to see really clearly what to take up and what to give up. So part of that might be those projects. Like, no one's saying that you need to, or whoever it is that's saying, whether it's your voice or your boss's voice, I don't know exactly what your scenario, that's telling you you need to do those, you can ask why. What would be the result on my mind? If it's true that every moment of my mind produces the next one, is that result on my mind the one that I want? So you at least get to ask yourself that, which I think is that's the real advantage that we're getting at here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Thomas.
Well, you and I are pretty similar, because I don't finish anything either. It's more fun to start a project, but finishing it, it's like, still? Like, isn't this done yet? But to what Supriya was saying, the projects that you will end will be the meaningful ones. And the projects that aren't so meaningful but might be fun, those aren't the important things. So it's like, but what you will do is it'll help you realize what is the important project and what is not the important project. You know, the person sitting next to you is more important than the job you're going to, right? The person that you see in the street, not just that person next to you, but you know what I mean? It's just like, it gives you that sense that the project I want to finish right now is to make the person next to me happy, right? The other projects, they're not as important. And once you realize that, then you stop beating yourself up for the project you didn't finish. Like the unfinished attic that I might never get around to finishing. It's not a big deal, you know? So keep starting your projects. Don't worry about finishing them.
That part about like beating myself up for projects I didn't finish, like has never felt true to me. Like I've only like beaten myself up because external forces beat me up for projects I didn't finish. But that is the part which is the part that like was striking out to me. It's like, have I ever felt that? Like,
oh wow.
And I didn't.
See, I'm from the Irish Catholic tradition, so beating yourself up is it's ingrained in us from childhood.
We do it in Judaism too.
Yes. We're very similar in that tradition, in that, you know, you got to feel guilty about what you didn't do, and that's how you finish it. But then who wants to finish something that you didn't want to finish anyway because it makes you feel guilty? I don't know. So, but anyway.
Our parents do it in Hinduism.
Yeah, I tried not to pass that on to my kids, but limited success. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Thomas.
Supriya.